How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? In this video, we discuss upcoming features for Apple Watch Series 6. We also talk about WatchOS 7 and the new features we discovered via iOS 14. So the initial thing on the docket is oxygen saturation. Apple Watch will, for the very first time, be able to detect blood oxygen levels directly from the convenience of your wrist, courtesy of WatchOS 7 and presumably Apple Watch Series 6. Now, it's possible that oxygen saturation metering could come to older models of Apple Watch hardware, such as Series 5 or even Series 4. In fact, actually, iFixit, during their initial teardown of the original Apple Watch, found evidence that Apple was considering blood oxygen metering back then. So who really knows how far back in the hardware cycle that Apple is going to allow this feature to be used? But why is this even a thing? Why is this interesting? Well, blood oxygen levels between 95% and 100% are considered healthy, whereas blood oxygen levels below 80%, that's a problem. And continued low blood oxygen saturation presents the risk of respiratory or cardiac arrest. So this is a serious health condition that you're going to be able to monitor directly from your wrist. That's really cool. So of course, Apple is developing a new health notification based on blood oxygen levels. So when detecting low blood oxygen saturation below a certain threshold, a notification trigger will alert the user, similar to the heart rate notifications already present in WatchOS. Now, why is this so cool? Well, it's because your Apple Watch is always on your person. It's always strapped to your wrist, whereas dedicated blood oxygen meters can be bulky. Oftentimes they'll use like your fingertip to measure that blood oxygen level. And then it's just something else you have to remember to carry around with you, or you have to use. Whereas this is just right on your wrist. It's actively monitoring the situation. So it's kind of proactive, if you will. That's a really cool thing to have. I imagine that this, like the heart rate notifications, could potentially save lives, or at the very least alert the user that they probably need to go visit a doctor and get a checkup just to see what this is all about. Now, of course, Apple Watch is not the first wearable to incorporate blood oxygen saturation metering. Fitbit actually beat Apple to the punch as far as this is concerned. They provide estimated SpO2 levels in its Versa, Ionic, and Charge 3 fitness trackers. So while Apple is not first to the market with such a feature, the Apple Watch is by far the most popular wearable out there. So this is going to bring benefits to many users, more so than any other fitness tracker out on the market. So Apple Watch Series 4 and Series 5 currently can use the ECG app to monitor heart activity, but there's a problem. There's inconclusive ECG readings with heart rates between 100 and 120 beats per minute. Now, a future update, and it's currently unclear if this is going to be a software update or hardware update, but a future update will fix this issue and provide conclusive readings in that range. Now, as we've noted previously, Apple is also incorporating sleep tracking features in the Apple Watch by means of a dedicated sleep app. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Apple accidentally leaked its own upcoming sleep app? Yeah, those were fun times. Well, new information has been discovered in iOS 14 code that supports the presence of this upcoming sleep tracking feature. Users will be able to set up personalized sleep tracking goals via the Health app on the iPhone. And the Health app will also make suggestions to improve sleep duration and quality as well. Now, we should also expect Control Center to get an upgrade in WatchOS 7. Specifically, you should find new toggles for sleep tracking and noise detection. And perhaps we'll see the same toggles in Control Center on iPhone as well. It was WatchOS 6 that first added the ability to release standalone Apple Watch apps with no iPhone companion app required. But even so, these apps were still built upon the old extension architecture. Well, WatchOS 7 is going to change things. It's going to change the architecture of Apple Watch apps. These will no longer be based on extensions. Now let's talk about perhaps the most exciting thing, watch faces. First, let me break the sad news. It doesn't appear that we're going to be able to create our own Apple Watch faces, at least just yet. But it does seem like Apple is at least taking a step in that direction with the ability to share watch faces between users. Yes, each watch face will be treated like its own individual file. These configurations will be shareable as files, being able to be previewed in the Files app, and shared via various methods, including AirDrop. So you're gonna be able to go in, customize this watch face to your liking, sort of like you can currently do right now, but the difference is you can share those configurations with other users. Now, it's unclear as to whether you'll be able to share these watch face configurations directly between two Apple Watches. Right now, it appears that two paired iPhones will be doing the sharing, and then each Apple Watch will be able to benefit from those shared faces. Now here's another really interesting detail, a brand new watch face called Infograph Pro. Now, of course, WatchOS 6 already includes two versions of the Infograph watch face. There's the Infograph Regular and the Infograph Modular. And this was, of course, introduced back in 2018 with Apple Watch Series 4. So WatchOS 7 is going to introduce a third version of Infograph called Infograph Pro. Now, the key element found in Infograph Pro is the presence of a tachymeter. I think I pronounced that right. Traditionally speaking, a tachymeter is that little outer ring on the outside of an analog watch that is used to measure speed based on distance and time. So this continues that trend of Apple pulling in analog functions and baking them into the digital Apple Watch world. So that was probably a pretty lousy explanation of what a tachymeter is used for. Basically, I just think of it as a tool to measure the speed between 2 points. I'll have a link down below in the description that does a much better job of explaining how a tachymeter is used, but nonetheless, it's cool to see Apple pulling more analog features into the digital world. Now let's talk about photos on the watch face. Right now, Apple allows you to use a single photo or take a group of photos from an album and randomly display them every time you raise your wrist or press the digital crown or you tap the watch, right? So whenever you wake your watch up, if you're using an album, it's gonna pull in a random photo from that album every time, and then you're like, oh, that's a nice photo, that's pretty surprising, right? Well, in WatchOS 7, Apple's gonna take it to the next level because you're gonna be able to display a shared album as your watch face. So why is that cool? Well, say you had a family, they're all contributing to the shared album, you raise your wrist, you get a new image every single time, well, not every time, but you get lots of new images, right? Every time you raise your wrist, you're getting something new, and it may surprise you what your family puts in there. Say a little picture of a newborn baby. You raise your wrist and you're like, oh, that's so cute, newborn baby. And then someone in your family thinks it's funny to put a picture of that scary monster in that shared album, and then you go and raise your wrist at night, and then you're like, oh, and then your Apple Watch gives you one of those heart alerts, and then it's just like a full circle, right? I don't know. Anyway, the point is shared albums allow multiple users to contribute, so you're always getting something new when you look at your watch face. Now, if you're a parent, listen up, because this one sounds really cool. Based on leaked code, it appears that Apple is developing the ability for parents to set up and manage Apple Watches directly on their iPhone. So you're not going to need a separate iPhone to configure your child's Apple Watch. This is called Apple Watch for Kids. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Jeff, that's not exactly new because you can already pair multiple Apple Watches with a single iPhone. And while that is true, that Apple Watch is tied to your account and you can only use one device at a time. So even though you have 3 or 4 devices paired to your particular iPhone, you can only really use one of them at any given time. So that's the downside. So with this new Apple Watch for Kids feature, these Apple Watches are still their independent watches on their own accounts. Under this new parent-child model, a parent could activate and manage an Apple Watch for a child without requiring a second iPhone to pair. That's the big deal here. But not just that, this will also offer parental controls for managing trusted contacts and available music. And then speaking of managing a child's device, there's a new school time feature in iOS 14 and watchOS 7 that will allow parents to manage their child's apps and complications that can be used during certain hours. So watchOS 7 sounds like a major win for parents that have been frustrated with the inability to really set up and manage an Apple Watch independently, but still be able to do that right from their own iPhone. So ladies and gentlemen, there is lots more to come about iOS 14, about watchOS 7, new hardware, etc. Tell me, what is your favorite feature that we've talked about in this video? Let me know down below in the comment section, and stay tuned because we'll have more videos like this in the future. This is Jeff with 9 to 5 Mac. Real funny to put that picture of that scary monster in that album, and then you raise your wrist and you're like, oh, and then you automatically get one of those. Tachymeter on an analog watch has those hard-coded numbers that go around the entire, outer circumference